Shōkaku was an aircraft carrier of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the lead ship of her class. Along with her sister ship Zuikaku, she took part in several key naval battles during the Pacific War, including the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands before being torpedoed and sunk by a U.S. submarine at the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Design. The Shōkaku-class carriers were part of the same program that also included the Yamato-class battleships, no longer restricted by the provisions of the Washington Naval Treaty, which expired in December 1936. The Imperial Japanese Navy was free to incorporate all those features they deemed most desirable in an aircraft carrier, namely high speed, a long radius of action, heavy protection and a large aircraft capacity. Shōkaku was laid down at Yokosuka Dockyard on 12 December 1937, launched on 1 June 1939, and commissioned on 8 August 1941. With an efficient modern design, a displacement of about 32,000 long tons, and a top speed of 34 knots, Shōkaku could carry 70 to 80 aircraft. Her enhanced protection compared favorably to that of contemporary Allied aircraft carriers and enabled Shōkaku to survive serious damage during the battles of the Coral Sea and Santa Cruz. Hull. In appearance, Shōkaku resembled an enlarged Hiryu, though with a 35.3 meters longer overall length, 4.6 meters wider beam and a larger island. As in Hiryu, the forecastle was raised to the level of the upper hangar deck to improve seakeeping. She also had a wider, more rounded and heavily flared bow which kept the flight deck dry in most sea conditions. The carrier's forefoot was of the newly developed bulbous type, sometimes referred to informally as a tailor pair, which served to reduce the hull's underwater drag within a given range of speeds, improving both the ship's speed and endurance. Unlike the larger bulbous forefoots fitted to the battleships Yamato and Musashi, however, Shōkaku's did not protrude beyond the ship's stem. Shōkaku was 10,000 tons heavier than Soryu, mainly due to the extra armor incorporated into the ship's design. Vertical protection consisted of 215 mm on the main armor deck over the machinery, magazines and aviation fuel tanks, while horizontal protection consisted of 215 mm along the waterline belt abreast the machinery spaces, reducing to 150 mm outboard of the magazines, unlike British carriers, whose aviation fuel was stored in separate cylinders or cofferdams surrounded by seawater. All pre-war Japanese carriers had their aviation fuel tanks built integral with the ship's hull, and Shōkaku was no exception. The dangers this posed, however, did not become evident until wartime experience demonstrated these were often prone to cracking and leaking, as the shocks and stresses of hits or near misses to the carrier's hull were inevitably transferred to and absorbed by the fuel tanks. Following the debacle at Midway in mid-1942, the empty air spaces around Shōkaku's aviation fuel tanks, normally pumped full of inert carbon dioxide, were instead filled with concrete in an attempt to protect them from possible damage. But this did little to prevent volatile fumes spreading to the hangar decks in the event damage did occur, particularly demonstrated when Kavala torpedoed and sank her. Shōkaku normally stowed 150,000 gallons of gas for operational use. Machinery. The geared turbines installed on Shōkaku were essentially the same as those on Soryu, maximum power increasing by 8,000 shp to 160,000 shp. In spite of all the additional armor, greater displacement, and a 2.1 meters increase in draft, Shōkaku was able to attain a speed of just over 34.2 knots during trials. Maximum fuel bunkerage was 4,100 tons, giving her a radius of action of 9,700 nmi at 18 knots. Two same-size downward curving funnels on the ship's starboard side, just abaft the island, vented exhaust gases horizontally from the boilers and were sufficiently angled to keep the flight deck free of smoke in most wind conditions. Flight deck in Hangars. Shōkaku's 242 meters long wood-planked flight deck ended short of the ship's bow and just barely short of the stern. It was supported by 4 steel pillars forward of the hangar box and by 2 pillars aft. The flight deck and both hangars were serviced by 3 elevators, the largest being the forward one at 13 meters by 16 meters. The middle and the rear elevators measured 13 meters by 12 meters. All 3 were capable of transferring aircraft weighing up to 5,000 kilograms and raising or lowering them took approximately 15 to 20 seconds. Shōkaku's 9 Type 4 electrically operated arrestor wires followed the same standard arrangement as that on her U-3 forward and 6 aft. They were capable of stopping a 6,000 kilograms aircraft at speeds of 60 to 78 knots. A third crash barrier was added and a light collapsible wind break screen was installed just forward of the island. The upper hangar was 623.4 by 65.6 feet and had an approximate height of 15.7 feet. The lower was 524.9 by 65.6 feet and had an approximate height of 15.7 feet. Together they had an approximate total area of 75,347 square feet. Hangar space was not greatly increased in comparison to Soryu, and both Shōkaku and Zuikaku could each carry just 9 more aircraft than Soryu, giving them a normal operating capacity of 72 plus room for 12 in reserve. Unlike on Soryu, the reserve aircraft did not need to be kept in a state of disassembly, however, thereby shortening the time required to make them operational. After experimenting with portside islands on 2 previous carriers, Akagi and Hayu, the IJN opted to build both Shōkaku and her sister ship Zuikaku with starboard side islands. In September 1942, a Type 21 air warning radar was installed on Shōkaku's island atop the central fire control director, the first such device to be fitted on any Japanese carrier. The Type 21 had a mattress antenna and the initial prototypes were light enough that no major structural modifications were necessary. Later versions, however, were bulkier and required eventual removal of the fifth fire control director in order to accommodate the larger and a heavier antenna. The presence of this radar, however, undoubtedly saved Shōkaku 1 month later at the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, when the ship was bombed by -3 Solomon Islands Dauntless dive bombers from US Enterprise. The early detection of the U.S. strike planes by this radar alerted refueling crews below deck, giving them time to drain and purge the aviation gasoline lines before they were ruptured by bomb hits, thus saving the ship from the catastrophic of gas fires and explosions that caused most of the carrier sinkings in the Pacific Theater. Armament. Shōkaku's primary air defense consisted of 16 127 mm Type 89 dual-purpose AA guns in twin mountings. These were sighted below flight deck level on projecting sponsons with 4 such paired batteries on either side of the ship's hull, 2 forward and 2 aft. 4 fire control directors were installed, 2 on the port side and 2 to starboard. A 5th fire control director was located atop the carrier's island and could control any or all of the heavy caliber guns as needed. Initially, light AA defense was provided by 12 triple-mount 25 mm Type 96 AA guns. In June 1942, Shōkaku had her anti-aircraft armament augmented with 6 triple 25 mm mounts, 2 each at the bow and stern, and 1 each fore and aft of the island. The bow and stern groups each received a Type 95 director. In October, another triple 25 mm mount was added at the bow and stern, and 10 single mounts were added before the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944. Operational history. Shōkaku and Zuikaku formed the Japanese 5th Carrier Division, embarking their aircraft shortly before the Pearl Harbor attack. Each carrier's aircraft complement consisted of 15 Mitsubishi A6M20 fighters, 27 Aichi D3A1 VAL dive bombers, and 27 Nakajima B5N1 or -2 Kate torpedo bombers. Shōkaku and Zuikaku joined the Kido Butai and participated in Japan's early wartime naval offensives, including Pearl Harbor and the attack on Rabaul in January 1942. In the Indian Ocean Raid of March-April 1942, aircraft from Shōkaku, along with the rest of Kido Butai, attacked Colombo, Ceylon on 5 April, sinking 2 ships in harbor and severely damaging support facilities. The task force also found and sank 2 Royal Navy heavy cruisers on the same day, as well as the aircraft carrier HMS Hermes on 9 April off Batticaloa. The 5th Carrier Division was then deployed to Truk to support Operation Mo. During this operation, Shōkaku's aircraft helped sink the American aircraft carrier US Lexington during the Battle of the Coral Sea but was herself severely damaged on 8 May 1942 by dive bombers from US Yorktown and Lexington, which scored 3 bomb hits, 1 on the carrier's port bow, 1 to starboard at the forward end of the flight deck and 1 just abaft the island. Fires broke out but were eventually contained and extinguished. The resulting damage required Shōkaku to return to Japan for major repairs. On the journey back, the carrier shipped so much water through her damaged bow she nearly capsized in heavy seas, maintaining a high rate of speed in order to avoid a cordon of American submarines out hunting for her. She arrived at Kure on 17 May 1942 and entered dry dock on 16 June 1942. Repairs were completed within 10 days and, a little over 2 weeks later on 14 July, she was formally reassigned to Striking Force, 3rd Fleet, Carrier Division 1. The time required for repairs, combined with the aircraft and aircrew losses incurred by her and Zuikaku, kept both carriers from participating in the Battle of Midway. Following her return to frontline duty, both Shōkaku and her sister ship Zuikaku, with the addition of the light carrier Zuiho, were redesignated as 1st Carrier Division and took part in 2 further battles in 1942. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons, where they damaged US Enterprise, but Shōkaku was in turn damaged by dive bombers of Enterprise, which therefore prevented the bombardment of nearby Henderson Field, and the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, where they crippled US Hornet. At Santa Cruz, on 26 October 1942, Shōkaku was again seriously damaged, taking at least 3 1,000-pound bomb hits from a group of 15 Douglas-3 Solomon Islands dive bombers launched from Hornet, with ample warning of the incoming American strike. Shōkaku's aviation fuel mains to the flight deck and hangars had been drained down and she had few aircraft on board at the time of the attack. As a result, no major fires broke out and her seaworthiness was preserved. Her flight deck and hangars, however, were left in shambles and she was unable to conduct further air operations during the remainder of the battle. The need for repairs kept her out of action for months, leaving other Japanese defensive operations in the Pacific lacking sufficient air power. After several months of repairs and training, Shōkaku, now under the command of Captain Matsubara Hiroshi, was assigned in May 1943 to a counterattack against the Aleutian Islands, but the operation was cancelled after the Allied victory at Attribution. For the rest of 1943, she was based at Truk, then returned to Japan for maintenance late in the year. Sinking. In 1944, Shōkaku was deployed to the Linga Islands south of Singapore. On 15 June, she departed with the mobile fleet for Operation Ago, a counter-attack against Allied forces in the Mariana Islands. Her strike waves suffered heavy losses from U.S. combat air patrols and anti-aircraft fire, but some survived and returned safely to the carrier. One of her D4Y strike groups, composed of veterans from the Coral Sea and Santa Cruz engagements, broke through and one plane allegedly struck home with a bomb that damaged the battleship South Dakota and caused many casualties. But this group suffered heavy losses themselves. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea, she was struck at 11:22 on the 19th of June by 3 torpedoes from the submarine Kavala. As Shōkaku had been in the process of refueling and rearming aircraft and was in an extremely vulnerable position, the torpedoes started fires that proved impossible to control. At 12:10, an aerial bomb exploded, detonating aviation fuel vapors which had spread throughout the ship. The order to abandon ship was given, but before the evacuation had progressed very far, Shōkaku abruptly took on water forward and sank quickly, bow first at position 11 degrees 40 N 137 degrees 40 E 11.667 degrees north 137.667 degrees east 11.667 137.667, taking 1,272 men with her. The light cruiser Yohaji and destroyers Yurikaze, Wakatsuki, and Hatsuzuki rescued Captain Matsubara and 570 men. Gallery. Planes from the Shōkaku preparing for the attack on Pearl Harbor. Nakajima B5N2, Kate, leaves the Shōkaku for Pearl Harbor. Bibliography. Boako Boakenshujo, Senshi Sosho Hawa Isakuzan. Tokyo. Asagumu Shimbunshi. Brown, David. World War II Fact Files. Aircraft Carriers. Arco Publishing. ISBN 0-668-04164-1. Chesno, Roger. Aircraft Carriers of the World, 1914 to the Present. Brockhampton Press. ISBN 1-86019-875-9. Dixon, David. Fighting Flat Tops. The Shōkaku. Warship International 14. 15-46. Dull, Paul S. A Battle History of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Naval Institute Press. Hamill, Eric. Guadalcanal. The Carrier Battles. Crown Publishers, Inc. ISBN 0-517-56608-7. Gensura, Hans George, Young, Dieter and Mickle, Peter. Warships of the Imperial Japanese Navy, 1869–1945. Annapolis, Maryland. United States Naval Institute. ISBN 0-87021-893-X. Lengerer, Hans. The Aircraft Carriers of the Shōkaku Class. In Jordan, John. Warship 2015. London. Conway. pp. 90–109. ISBN 978-1-84486-276-4. Lundstrom, John B. The First Team. Pacific Naval Air Combat from Pearl Harbor to Midway. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-59114-471-X. Lundstrom, John B. The First Team and the Guadalcanal Campaign. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-55750-526-8. Pt. Mark. Sunburst. The Rise of Japanese Naval Air Power 1909–1941. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-55750-432-6. Polmar, Norman and Genda, Minoru. Aircraft Carriers. A History of Carrier Aviation and Its Influence on World Events. Volume 1, 1909–1945. Washington, D.C. Potomac Books. ISBN 1-57488-663-0. Rower, Jürgen. Chronology of the War at Sea 1939–1945. The Naval History of World War II. Annapolis, Maryland. Naval Institute Press. ISBN 1-59114-119-2. Shores, Christopher, Cull, Brian and Izawa, Yasuho. Bloody Shambles. The Drift Toward to the Fall of Singapore. London. Grub Street. ISBN 0-9488175-0x. Shores, Christopher, Cull, Brian and Izawa, Yasuho. Bloody Shambles. 2. The Defense of Sumatra to the Fall of Burma. London. Grub Street. ISBN 0-948817674. Stiller, Mark. The Coral Sea 1942. The First Carrier Battle. Campaign 214. Oxford, UK. Osprey Publishing. ISBN 9781849081061. Stiller, Mark. Tora. Pearl Harbor 1941. Raid 26. Oxford, UK. Osprey Publishing. ISBN 9781849085090. Stiller, Mark. USN Carriers vs. IJN Carriers. The Pacific 1942. Duel 6. Oxford, UK. Osprey Publishing. ISBN 9781846032486. Tully, Anthony P. IJN Shōkaku. Tabular Record of Movement. Kidobutai. CombinedFleet.com. Retrieved 14 July 2015. Tully, Anthony, Partial, John and Wolfe, Richard. The Sinking of Shōkaku, An Analysis. Kidobutai. CombinedFleet.com. Retrieved 26 July 2015. Zim, Alan D. Attack on Pearl Harbor. Strategy, Combat, Myths, Deceptions. Havertown, Pennsylvania. Casemate Publishers. ISBN 978161200-010-7.